Hello and welcome to another episode of Autogefuel. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the facelifted 2020 Land Rover Discovery Sport. Let's take a closer look and see what it's capable of.
Just thinking of the days and seasons might divide us. Dance around the fire, putting on the memories of you. I know I feel the world of the sound, the beat of the drums, feel the wind blowing on my face. I let the sweet float around, push my ears to the ground, sense of life straight out to your place.
The Discovery Sport is 2.17 meters wide and 4.59 meters long. So with this facelift, it really hasn't changed in size much. But what has changed, and what you will notice quite immediately, is the front face. Before, the Discovery Sport kind of had a more youthful look with larger and curved headlamps. But now, I think this looks almost identical to its elder brother, the regular Discovery. So we have slim headlamps, now with matrix LED and cascading turn indicator lights, vertical slats here with some aerodynamic channels, again very similar to its elder brother. You can also get the Discovery Sport in a more sporty variant like the one you see here, the R-Dynamic. And for example, the bumper for the R-Dynamic is much more sporty, as you can see. Apart from the sporty front bumper, the R-Dynamic version also gets body-colored wheel arches instead of having a black cladding. This visually brings the car lower to the ground and makes it seem a little bit more athletic, a little bit more sporty. Seems like it has a lower center of gravity. What do you guys prefer? I think I could go either way. Over here you have the Discovery logo as well as the R-Dynamic logo stamped lower down. Here at the back of the Discovery Sport, well, first of all, you notice that the roofline is still fairly high. And that means, like most Land Rovers, it's a very utilitarian, very purposeful design. There is no coupe roof, nothing like that. It's boxy and it's purposeful. But you do have a glossy black spoiler, which I think is purely for cosmetic purposes. But if you notice on the top of the shark fin antenna, there is a camera which feeds the view from the rear live into your inside rear view mirror, which actually doubles as a monitor. And we'll take a closer look at that once we're sitting inside. The 2020 Discovery Sport is on Land Rover's premium transverse architecture platform. First of all, this has upgraded suspension components like the McPherson struts in the front and the multi-link suspension in the rear, but also this will allow for electrification further on down the road. But right now, we have a choice of turbocharged 4-cylinder 2-liter engines. First of all, nice to see gas-charged struts and some insulation on the top of the hood. So the Ingenium engines, like I mentioned, are all 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engines, diesel and petrol. The nomenclature is very simple to understand. D stands for diesel, P stands for petrol, and the number that follows is the PS, or the metric horsepower. So you have a D150, a D180, and like the one you see here, a D240. There's also a P200 and a P250. Excuse my terribly dirty shoes. We're out in the woods to get some nice shots for you guys. I'll try not to keep the car, or I'll try to keep the car as clean as possible. So getting inside is fairly easy, again because the SUV stance makes ingress quite easy. Very large door opening as well. Headroom is ample, I mean, it's incredible. It's really, really spacious. We also have the panoramic sunroof, so that also liberates a lot of space right on top of my head. First of all, let's take a look at the material. So really nice soft material on the top. Some interesting, textured glossy element over here. A lot of plush materials over here as well. So overall, the build quality and the materials are, I think, definitely a step up. What's also new and a step up is the steering wheel. I also like the kind of this shiny rim along the middle. Again, reminds me of a Volvo steering wheel. It's fairly nice to hold, although the contours between where the strip ends and where the rest of the padded material starts takes a little bit of getting used to. But overall, I think it looks really nice. There's also a lot of controls on the steering wheel, which I'm not that fond of. So for example, you have the controls here for the volume and the audio system, as well as navigating through the menu. And technically you can swipe down like this or up to change the volume, but it rarely ever works and you have to resort to using the buttons. And since they're very circular, it's not a very clearly defined kind of a punch where you have to push these different buttons. So it takes a little bit of getting used to. It's not bad. Of course, another main talking point is this 10-inch infotainment system. In the top end, it comes fully loaded with things like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So a lot of hotkey buttons down here, which honestly, I wish they were on the top, because when you're driving, it's a little bit hard to reach over this little lip here to touch these buttons. I would have much rather have these hotkeys or these shortcuts on the top so they're easier to point to, or have this lip here smoothened out so that it's easier to tap them, in this kind of a motion. But nevertheless, as you can see, Android Auto, there's a valet mode, you have a web browser, you have live traffic, you have different ambient light settings, and so on and so forth. Navigation is okay. Honestly, I would just stick to your Android Auto because it's not the quickest to respond, but it's definitely useful to have. You have, of course, your auto for the AC vent control, but you can change the temperature with this knob over here. If you want to change your seat to be either heating or cooling, you press it. Now you can toggle left for cooling or right for heating. So very easy to use the system. And if you want to change the blower speed, you press this and now this becomes the blower speed. So you're multitasking with the same buttons here, and I think that's a really good way of doing it. The rear view mirror and the ORVMs are auto dimming, but we also have the live feed with the camera on the back antenna displayed right here on this monitor. The Discovery Sport actually has a very versatile seating arrangement. You can actually get this with 7 seats, so you have 5 plus 2 in the rear, albeit very small rear seats. But nevertheless, even the middle row can be moved forward, can be reclined, and therefore very easy to have different combinations for your seating arrangements. However, getting into the third row, I can tell you, is quite tricky. We don't have the 7-seat version, but you can imagine, because of this wheel arch impeding into this area here, getting to the third row is quite difficult. But nevertheless, getting into the middle row is fairly easy. You have a grab handle up here. I'm going to try to get rid of as much mud from my shoes as possible. And yeah, inside, there's plenty of space in here. I'm 5'8" or 1.7 meters, thereabouts. The seat is set to my driving position, and as you can see, I have ample knee room. I can slide my feet under the front seat. I have plenty of headroom, and because of this large, expansive panoramic roof, I feel like I'm not hemmed in. It's very bright with that bright headliner color, so really spacious and airy. Let's take a look in the trunk. There's a power tailgate, and inside we have 963 liters of boot space. I can get rid of the parcel shelf and remove it altogether. A very flat loading area, even not much of a loading lip. We have some scuff plates here so that you don't damage your bumper or your suitcase loading your items inside. There's some tether points over here which you can slide and lock into new places so that you can have, different sections and compartments. First aid kit behind this little mesh wall. There is a 12-volt power socket over here. And below this, you also have, for example, your tire repair kit. You can also optionally get a spare wheel. Let's start off our driving here in the city, because let's face it, even though this is a Land Rover, it's kind of going to be used quite a lot more often in the city for the school run, going to pick up groceries and things like that. And first impressions, well, it's actually not too bad. And that's because the Discovery Sport isn't as large as some of its older siblings, like the full-size Discovery or the full-size Range Rover. So yes, it's a little bit wide and it's a little bit longer than perhaps the most ideal city car, but it's not that terrible. However, the throttle response, when you're going at slow speeds, even in normal or eco mode, sometimes can get a bit lurchy. And when you're just trying to creep in and out of parking spaces, or you're trying to parallel park with millimeter precision, that's where that kind of jerky throttle input can be a little bit of a problem. On the other hand, though, the steering is fairly lightweight, so that's pretty good because you can make quick corrections and turn into parking spots and navigate narrow streets quite easily. There's a lot of cameras that you can use. There's a top-down 360 camera. There's also the ground view camera. And I've been driving this car in some really narrow parking garages, and it is a bit daunting, but I've found the 360-degree camera to be a lot more useful than the ground view. Because even though the ground view gives you a nice view of the front wheels, it doesn't really give you a good idea of what the back wheels are doing. So the 360 camera is good that way because you can see where the rear wheels are, the front wheels are. You can see the different tracks that these wheels are following and make sure you don't curb anything. That's also why I would probably recommend, if you're going to be driving in the city and you live in the city and you want this car, it's probably better to get it with 19-inch wheels rather than 20, because there's less chance of you curbing them and scratching the wheels. All right, now we're on the highway, so let's test the high-speed mannerisms of the Discovery Sport. First of all, let's talk about the advanced driver assistance systems, because of which there are so many now on this new facelift version. There's things like blind spot monitoring, there is advanced adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist, things like that. And you can access all of that with a menu here right on your virtual instrument cluster, and you have all of them at your fingertips, and you can set up almost every parameter for all of these different assistance systems. So you have collision avoidance for forward alert, you have a blind spot monitoring, cross traffic alert, but even for things like the steering assistance, for lane keeping assist, you can either have it just buzz and vibrate the steering wheel to give you a notification that you're straying off the lane, or you can actually have it intervene and steer the car automatically. And this is one of those, lane centering lane keep assist systems. So it's not going to keep reacting to the edge and ping-ponging you back and forth, but instead it will try to analyze the lines and try to keep you in the center. And it works really well. Even right now, for example, we're on the contraflow, and I've tested this before, it does work quite well. Apart from that, you also have speed limit awareness, so you have the traffic sign recognition, and you can even set it to be alerting you right when you're on the speed limit, or alerting you maybe 10 kilometers per hour over the limit. So there's so many different customization options for each of these advanced driver assistance systems. So let's set the cruise control. Now I'm on the Autobahn, this is unrestricted, so let's put it up to 130. By the way, the increments for the speed I've checked is just 2 or 10, so you don't have 1 kilometer per hour increments to increase or decrease the speed. So you could actually never get 135 or 125. It would be 132 or 134 or 136. You get what I mean. It's not a big deal, but just something to keep in mind. right, so now we're in a very narrow single lane mountain road. So let's put it through its paces. Bumpy streets as well. So here you can feel that slightly stiffer suspension, but overall it's still very comfortable. Body control is fairly impressive, really, for an SUV of this size. The good visibility is definitely aiding, but the A-pillar, you know, again, it's not a sports car, but if you're going around a corner at a really high speed, it's hard to look into the corner because the A-pillar kind of impedes that view, but otherwise it's not too bad. The steering rack is also fairly slow in the sense that, you know, you need to give a lot of lock to get a turn. It's not that progressive, it's not a fast track. This is again good for city and it's good for off-roading at least. Yeah, that rotation really comes into play now. See, we're going around these hairpins. Slow down, turn into the corner, put the foot down. Understeer and wheel spin, but not that bad. You know, I wouldn't mind if they had some kind of a artificial sound being pumped in. You know, that would be okay with me actually. This is a nice winding hairpin section. And that engine, the power delivery is still not linear, even in this mode. Let's just leave it in automatic sport. So I'm gonna let it pick the gear that it wants because there is not a lot of torque low down in the rev range. Well, we found a little gravel track, so let's see what the terrain response system has to offer. Of course, in reality, this is not a challenge for most cars, let alone the Discovery Sport. But there's some interesting views that I can have. For example, on the infotainment system, there's a view here which shows me if I have two-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, which wheels are getting the traction, the steering angle. I can also see another view for the pitch and the tilt of the car, a compass. I even have those views up here on my head-up display. But first I'm going to go into the terrain response system and select gravel, snow, and activate low traction launch. No, I don't think I need low traction launch, but if this track was covered in snow and ice, then sure, I think that would have been a great program to select because it will modulate the throttle. Again, like I mentioned, it'll keep this very low ratio first gear, manage the throttle very gently and gradually to help me set off. It's not that uncomfortable either. I have good visibility. I can see through the corner from this from the side window. I can peer in between the gap from the outside rear view mirror. I can also see where I'm placing the wheels here. I can make sure I don't hit any of the rocks. There's a lot of trees around here. If in case I do find this a bit tricky, there's of course the ground view, and what this allows me to do is when I'm driving, it will record the track in front of me and display that so I can see virtually through the hood. I can see where the front wheels are placed. I can see where the what's going underneath me. So if I'm going over a big rock, I can make sure that I'm not going to scrape it. I still would recommend you keep the 19-inch wheels because even on a rough road like this, it's still absorbing the gravel and the shocks much better than a 20-inch rim would do. And there's also less chance of you scraping it. So this is definitely where this feels a little bit more at home. And all said and done, this is not the Defender. It's not a true hardcore off-roader, but it's still charming. It still gives me that spirit of adventure. A weekend hobbyist. I'm not a true off-roader at all, but this allows me to feel that sense of adventure and go anywhere ability and make me feel that I can do something extremely crazy or go to some new unforeseen places. The Discovery Sport starts with the base trim, then the S, then the SE, and then finally the HSE. The base trim starts at around 38,000 euros. The SE starts at around 56,000 euros, but our test vehicle here with all the bells and whistles that it has is a whopping 63,000 euros, which is a bit expensive if you ask me. So, what are you getting for that money? Well, first of all, it's the Land Rover Spirit of Adventure, the go anywhere ability that this brand stands for. And sure, this might not be the most off-road capable Land Rover out there, but it's certainly much more capable than some of its rivals. It's also very comfortable, very spacious on the inside, very luxurious. I really like a lot of the new technology that is on offer. The virtual instruments work really well. The infotainment, not so well, but I do like the camera systems. And of course, that terrain response, all-wheel drive, on-demand system provides the best of both worlds for 90% of the population. What I didn't like so much perhaps is the fact that it doesn't really give you very good mileage. The diesel engines should be a little bit more efficient, so I would recommend stick to the 180 and skip this top-end diesel engine. Secondly, it's not the most dynamic SUV out there. And again, I don't think it's really trying to be. If you want something sporty and still have an SUV, then you'll be better off picking the BMW X3 or the Porsche Macan. If you don't want a luxurious premium 5+2 mid-size SUV, then you have plenty of options like the 5008 or the Kodiaq. So overall, keep the options minimal, spec it just right, and if you want to go on that adventure, take it off-roading, the Discovery Sport might just be the car for you.